check, check. Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing this morning? See, we got Mike Whaley's here, Ryan Buttrum's here, Scalda's here, Joe Paddock is here. Hope everybody can hear me this morning and everything is video's good and all that. I still got to figure out why YouTube keeps screaming at me about unsupported resolution. Yeah. Is this thing on? I accidentally unplugged my mic this morning, so I was making sure I got it. When I plugged it back in, it was working. Oh. Well, winter schedule has arrived here in Nashville, so things have changed a little bit downtown. And not only for scheduling purposes, but they've changed up dramatically in audience size. Printers this week are in the same state they were last week. I do have the Tornado all apart right now. I've got to take it further apart because it's hard to access the back of the power supply with it the way it's mounted in the box. And I disconnected it from the box, but you still can't really get to the back of it because of the way the wires are. So I'm actually gonna have to unplug all the wires from everything, feed it all through the hole in the box, and just so I can get to it better. Oh yeah, the Music City Bowl, is that who's playing? I hadn't even looked to see who was playing. Yeah, we always get a nice little bump right at New Year's, a day or two before, and up through New Year's, and then from New Year's until like March, it'll be dead. Purdue versus Auburn. My dog is messing with the curtains again. Would you leave the curtains alone? All right. Well, I guess we got some people here, so we'll get started on today's tutorial. So last week we covered making functional axles and wheels, but the wheel that I made for last week was literally just a cylinder. There was nothing spectacular about it. Good morning, Roy. And so I thought today I'd show you guys how to make aesthetically pleasing wheels and tires, and then so that way you can design wheels and tires, and then you can watch last week's video on how to put the axle in it. And then after we get done with the tutorial, I'm going to talk about this. So stick around after the tutorial and we'll talk about what this is and what's going on with it. So let's get started, everybody. Not to sound like Angus. Let's get started. So we will go to the screen share. Let me move the chat out of the way over here. And then let me open a new Blender file. Oh, well, come on. There we go. All right. Actually, something I probably needed from that. No, we'll just design the wheel. I already showed you how to cut the axle in. Delete the cube. Let's get let's run the script to get screencast keys going. We'll go into the text editor, which is right there, and then we will open. And again, I hope 2.8 brings this back so I don't have to keep doing this. Start display. Alright, I'm going to the orthographic view. Alright, so when you're making a wheel, the first thing you have to consider in your final design, if you've sketched something up or whatever, is how many spokes does the wheel have. Because however many spokes the wheel has, you want to multiply that number by 2 and then make sure that the number of faces, number of segments your cylinder has is divisible by that number. So if you wanted a 5-spoke wheel, then you'd multiply that by 2, which is 10, and then you want to make sure the number of sides your cylinder has is divisible by 10. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to create cylinder. Alright, so if we wanted a 5-spoke wheel, we'd want to make sure this is divisible by 10. So let's go 50. Afternoon where you're at there, Ben, and good morning here. So, all right, so I set the number to 50. That's divisible by 10. And we're going to scale it along the Z. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees along the, along the Y. There we go. All right. I'm going to scale the whole thing down a little bit. This is going to be the central hub of our wheel. I'll scale it back out in the X a little bit. So yeah, this is going to be the central hub of our wheel. Face select mode, and we're going to deselect that face and that face. We're going to hit Shift D to duplicate those surfaces, and we're going to scale them out. Now we're going to extrude and scale them out again. And we're going to scale it in along the X so they're flat again. All right. Now we're going to select the center here. And we're going to line it up flat against there. Go into vertex select mode. That's too deep. It's deeper than I need the wheel to be. I'm going to slide this back a little. All right. So the reason we did that is because we want the wheel to lay flat when we print it on the build plate. You don't have to do that if your design doesn't call for that, but that's the way I'm doing this. It makes it easier to print. All right. So now I'm going to ring cut this into about there. Morning, Ed. Today we are designing wheels and tires. So I'm going to design a wheel. We're going to design a tire. I decided I wanted a 5-spoke wheel, so we made it divisible by 10 because you take 5 spokes times 2 to account for the blank spaces. It's 10. Make sure your number of sides is divisible by that number. I'm going to ring cut this one. All right. So now we're going to go into face select mode. All right, so we know that's our top one right there. All right, so I have those 5 selected. We're going to go skip 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 more. 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. While holding down Shift, select more faces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then just count, make sure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're back. Okay, so we didn't get off count. So when you go around, it's always best to go ahead and count that last group, even though you've already selected everything, because it's easy during this process to accidentally get off one, and then you'll know if you come out with 4 here or 6 here, then you got off by 1 somewhere. All right, so we're going to extrude, scale out. I'm going to select these and bring them back to, because when we scale, it scales in every direction. So that put it scaling itself behind the wheel, which we don't need. So which I see some vertices being naughty here, so hold on. Which what is it? I don't know. We'll fix those later. All right. So now we're going to select I just need to get closer where I can grab them better. Select those. Now, the things you can do with design, if you want the spokes to line up perfectly and straight, you just select the ones across from it. Right? So we selected those across from it, and then you can type in, just hit spacebar and type in bridge. You'll see bridge edge loops. Click it, it'll bridge them. Now, if you want to do something interesting, like have a wheel that looks kind of directional, like it's, you know, doing some cool stuff, you can also bridge them off center from each other like that. Yes, ring cut is Control R. So I offset that by 2 faces to get that look there. But again, if you want it to line up straight, you just get them across from each other, bridge edge loops. I'm sure there is a hotkey for it, but anytime you're looking for something in Blender, if you don't know the hotkey, you can hit the space bar and just start typing what you're looking for. In this case, we were looking to bridge. By the time I typed in the word bridge edge loops right there. So we're going to go ahead and keep those straight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it'll remember the last time you did it. So when you hit spacebar the next time, that's what's already brought up. So if you're repeating the process, you can just hit spacebar and enter, and it'll repeat it. So I'm telling y'all, Blender's not that scary. It's okay. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bridge edge loops. Select these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Spacebar, enter to repeat bridging edge loops. And again, somebody who's a real Blender wizard like Joe Larson, somebody like that would probably just go, well, you're making this harder than it has to be, but even this it's just so easy to me. I don't, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, when you're holding down the shift key, you can select, faces and keep adding them to the selection. And we bridged. So there we go. So just like that, you got a nice little 5-spoke wheel. Right, that's the beauty of Blender, is there's no limit to, the only limit is your creativity. So then we're going to make this one look a little more interesting. We're going to hit I to do an inset. We inset the face. Now we're just going to drag it out a little bit. So the wheel's got a nice little hub in the middle. Tab out of edit mode so we can look at it this way. Not too bad, right? Fun little 5-spoke wheel. Okay, so yeah, we started with a cylinder, and you make your cylinder divisible by the number of spokes times 2. So if you want a 5-spoke wheel, you make sure it's divisible by the number of sides of your cylinder needs to be divisible by 10. If it is a 6-spoke wheel, your number of sides to your cylinder needs to be divisible by 12. So that's really the first thing you need to know is how many spokes do I want this wheel to have. So, if you wanted to be a 9-spoke wheel, it would need to be divisible by 18 and so forth. Yeah, it's a happy little wheel. It's the Bob Ross wheel of Tuesday morning. This happy little wheel can live right here in this little virtual world. Yeah, edit mode's where the magic happens. Edit mode's where you get to have fun and really start to, like, okay, tab back into edit mode. Say we wanted to do something cool with this, like let's grab these. Add some detail to the wheel real quick. I'm going to hit I to inset the faces. Then I'm going to extrude them back in. There. Now our wheel has some neat little details to it. So there you go. That's how you design a wheel. I showed you last week how to cut an axle into a wheel. So now you can go watch last week's tutorial and put an axle in this, and it'll be ready to spin. You just put the axle right there in the center cylinder. But yeah, there we go. That is and just for sake of checking stuff, go here and we got our 3D printing toolbox. We clicked check all, no non-manifold edges. It's all good. Overhang faces, don't worry about that. You're going to have those depending upon which direction the model's sitting. We could put a spinner on it. We could do that. Wouldn't be that hard. but I don't want to confuse everybody. And by the way, good morning D, and good morning Matt/Jake and Brian Vines. So yeah, there we go. We have a wheel. It's simple, right? It's not. That's not complicated. And using a similar procedure, we're going to dive into the tires now. So with a tire, you'll find a lot of tutorials online about making tires, but most of those tutorials are going to be designing tires for like 3D rendering for animation or for gaming. And those tires, I've tried those tutorials. Those tires never come out manifold. I've never been able to get one to come out manifold. And if it's not manifold, it will not 3D print. So my workaround for that, my method of doing it, was to make a torus. So we're going to start with a torus. And I find it best for purposes of assembly to have your tire match your wheel in number of faces, because even though it looks pretty nice and round, there will be some minor flat spots. And you know, just because it's a 3D model, it's made up of flat faces. If they match, you're going to find that magic line where they line up just perfect when they slide together. All right, so we've created our torus. We're going to go up in minor segments a little because that's going to be our tread. So the major segments is your number of faces this way. Your minor segments are your number of faces this way. So our tread, we're gonna go complicated with this one. Let's go up to 24. I've never done one as high as 24, I don't think. Anyway. So, all right, we're going to rotate it 90 degrees along the Y. Then we're going to scale it down. We're going to get in here close so we can see. Scale it down. Till it's just about to touch, but not quite. That'll give us the tolerance we need. Put it in the middle of the wheel. Then we're going to tab into edit mode. Now here I'm going to go into edge select mode, because we're going to modify the edges. All right, so there's your innermost edge. Hold down the Alt key and we're going to grab that one. Go to the other side. Holding Shift and Alt, we're going to grab that one. So we're going to go back into this view. We're going to scale those in until they're flat. Scale those in. Until they're flat. Scale those in until they're flat with each other. Alright. So that's probably enough. So then we're going to select the whole thing. We're going to scale it along the X only till the inner lines are scale along the X. Till the inner lines are about lined up with the edge of the rim. And I'm going to grab all of these and all these, scale them in along the X a little bit. Back into edge select mode and holding down the Alt key. The Alt key will select the ring all the way around. I'm going to grab this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. We're going to scale those down little ways. Now we're going to deselect that one and deselect that one. Scale those down just little ways, which you can kind of eyeball it a little bit. All right. So now we have the basic foundation for our tire. Now tread. Again, we made 50 segments. So that's a nice even number. Let's come up with a tread pattern now. And this is where you can. This is a little time consuming. I'm not gonna lie. This is a little time consuming right here. We're just gonna make something fairly simple. Now this could be part of the reason this is time consuming is because you're just going to be kind of feeling this out unless you've planned it out like ahead of time on paper or something. Something like that, because this is what you're making the little tread lugs, and you can make them any way you want. I'm just this would be kind of an off-road looking tire. Oops. And you're just making this pattern all the way around. Whatever pattern you come up with. Just doing this right now because it's quick and easy. And should line up. Unless I miscalculated something. So you may be watching me mess this up live. Cool, right? But then we'll just see that exactly what I was talking about. Sometimes this takes a little trial and error. Sometimes it takes a little time. Because the tutorials you're going to find online for most tires are going to use the array modifier, where you're going to make the tread pattern, and then you're just going to use the array modifier, and then you're going to wrap that array modifier around a circle and fuse it together. But for some reason it never comes out manifold, so it's not 3D printable. And fixing the number of spots that aren't manifold in it would take many more hours than this does. Morning, Vince. and John is here. John, thank you for the shout out on Twitter earlier. I appreciate that very much, man. That meant a lot. To even get mentioned in the same breath with some of those guys, that's very, very flattering. Thank you. So we're just going around the tire and we're repeating this pattern that we created. Like I said, feel free to come up with whatever pattern, shape, design you want to. And just holding the shift key, you select your vertices, or your faces rather. I'm not doing vertices right now, we're at the face select mode. And I think this isn't going to line up. Oh no. We'll see. Hold on. Oh. No, it's not. Okay, so there we go. I made a mistake. So we have to start over. Such is life. Okay. My pattern took an odd number, that's why. My pattern needs to take a even number divisible by 50. May have made a mistake in the number of faces I chose to make this. Like I said, I don't normally model in this. What? I don't know what that was. I didn't push anything. I think this will work. If it doesn't, we'll try. That's why I said this part can be time consuming, and I didn't have a tread pattern planned out ahead of time. But I think making my pattern take up 3 instead of an even number, I think it's going to come out. If not, I'm going to have to sit down and actually do some math this morning, which it's too early in the morning for that, and too little sleep. I don't think this one's going to work out either. We'll see. No, it's off. Okay, so 2 didn't work, and 3 doesn't work. Right. So it's 4 plus a blank. Okay. Thank you, Ed, for doing the math for me this morning. Because I'm not feeling math today. Okay, so 5. 4 plus the blank spot. So our pattern needs to be 4 long. Trying to do something more interesting. How about that? So then we have blank. Blank. Blank one. So yeah, this is the most time-consuming part of it. Requires the most patience of the process. And a little prior planning could have made this a lot smoother. You know what to say about prior planning? Skip one. There we go. That's going to come out. All right. So now that we have our tread pattern all highlighted and selected, we're going to scale. Wait a minute. Sorry. No, we're going to extrude, then scale. So E, then S. So there we go. Made a nifty little off-road tire and wheel. I usually haven't, most of the designs I've done have worked with even numbers on the spokes, not odd. So morning, Ben Craig. So there we go. My tread pattern thing was a little more painful than I thought it was going to be this morning because, again, I didn't plan it out. But that just goes to show you, you know, that's the most painful part of the process is figuring out your tread pattern. So there we've made a wheel and a tire. I showed you last week how to cut the axle into it. And so that's our tutorial this week. Got a wheel and a tire. Let's render it. And that's fully 3D printable. And I could have come up with a better tread pattern if I'd given some time. Because another thing you can do to make yourself some more interesting tread patterns, you can rotate individual before you extrude it. You can't do it after you extrude it, but before you extrude it, you can select, you know, the rings like this along here, and you can rotate them a number of degrees to give yourself different shapes. So say you selected this one and you rotated it. Well, I'll just undo my tread pattern because you already saw how to do it. So let's undo the tread pattern here. We'll get rid of it. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Like we could select this one. Let's go into this view. And we're just going to rotate it like 10 degrees. So I hit R and 10. So you can see there, now it changed the shape of the faces. So now if you were making tread, you can make pointy tread. So then we could do the same thing here. I'm going to Alt, select, rotate 10 degrees. Oh wait. Put it in my side view first. Actually, I can do it from here. Rotate 10 degrees along the X. Same here. Rotate, so R, type in 10 along the X. So now you can see you can make a more like performance car style tread pattern if you wanted to go around and select all the vertices on it, or all the faces on it rather. So again, it's really up to you. You know, the only limitation is your imagination. Like we can select these two. Let's rotate them 5 degrees along the X. So you can see where you can make some much more intricate tread designs just by rotating some of the edges. So go into Edge Select, hold down Alt, select an edge, and rotate it, in this case along the X. See, I beg to differ there, Mike. I believe you have lots of imagination. So now that's made for, you know, some potentially more interesting tread patterns. So you can see if you were to follow that design all the way around, it could be fun. Spiky treads are a little trickier just because of the way Blender works. It would be easy to do using the array modifier and and that sort of thing, the array and curve modifier. But then you run into problems with trying to make it manifold. Um, Spiky tread. Because see, the other problem that I was thinking, I was like, okay, well, um, you could extrude it out and then scale it down, but you would have to do that on each individual one, which I mean you could do. But it would take you some time to get it lined up. So again, it's possible. The array modifier would probably be your friend there, but you're gonna run into some problems with making things manifold. I'm just playing now. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up the tutorial portion of the day. I'm just playing now, just seeing what it would look like. It'll be fun. Anyhow, that wraps up the tutorial. Showed you how to make a wheel, starting with just a basic cylinder, and then we showed you how to make a 3D printable tire with just a torus. I showed you last week how to cut an axle into that wheel, so you'll be able to now design wheels, tires, and axles. We talked about hinges in the first tutorial Tuesday, so you can make hinges, so you could design doors for something. And so you guys are on your way to being able to design your own vehicles just by following a few simple tutorials. Oh, the intro, the stream starting soon thing. It was just a stock music I pulled off of YouTube. YouTube gives you music you can use that's royalty free. And I went to, that's what YouTube calls rock and roll. I chose the genre as rock and roll, and it was listed as angry rock and roll. I was like, it doesn't sound angry to me, but it sounds okay. It sounds less cheesy than the rest of the music you have, so I'm gonna use it. Yeah, it's because I don't want to spend thousands of dollars in the studio to record an intro song for my YouTube video. Studio time in Nashville is about $200 an hour. Yeah, well, I sat and I listened to like clips of probably 50 songs, and that was the only one that wasn't just absolutely repulsive to me. I have not played with the animation or video editing parts of Blender yet. I plan to dive more into that with the release of 2.8. 2.8 is in beta now. It's supposed to have improved all of those workflows dramatically and changed them a lot. So I thought, well, rather than diving into learning something new that is just going to be here in a month completely changed, I'll wait until that comes out. Well, I do have a home studio, but I only play acoustic guitar. I don't play bass and drums and electric guitar and all that stuff. So yeah, I could make an acoustic guitar strummy thing with no leads or drums or bass. What fun is that? That's boring. All right, so those of y'all who stuck around through the tutorial, we said we were going to talk about this and what this is. Yeah, my chat pulled back up here. All right, I'm going to talk about this. I am working on functional steering and suspension for the Jeep. So I'm making a version that's going to have functional steering and suspension, and this is the first prototype. So this is the first prototype. As you can see, it's got the axles here. The spindles are here. There's a steering linkage between the two. Now, the best part about it, which I've already iterated this a little bit to allow this to turn farther. So the next time I print it, it'll be able to turn farther. But this is all print in place. All the black you see there is printed in one print. It's printed just like that. Take the supports off, break it loose, and then you have that. So yeah, the steering linkage there that keeps them connected together. And then I put a piece similar to my axle through this so that it will be mounted to the frame, and so as the vehicle goes over bumps, this will articulate like this. And the springs, which are not glued in yet, they're just set in place, which are 3D printed springs, will dampen that and return it to, should return it to level. So yeah, all of that is print in place. And that is using the exact same stuff that I showed you guys with the hinge tutorial, the tutorial Tuesday on hinges. It's the same thing. There's one here on each side. It's essentially just a hinge joint. So the spindle has two hinges, one that connects to the steering control arm and one that connects to the axle. And I've already iterated the design because it runs into it right there on that corner. So I rounded off those corners, so it should allow it to turn a little farther. This was my first time attempting to design anything like this. But it's print in place, it's functional, and it's fun. I like just sitting here and working the spindle back and forth and watching the control arm move. And then, again, this will be mounted on, this piece will be mounted on the frame, allowing the axle to articulate. And yeah, and those are 3D printed compression springs right there. And they work. PLA. It's nothing, it's not TPU, it's not flexible, it's PLA. And they are functional 3D printed springs. So yeah, Roy, in the fairly near future, there will be a beta prototype testing available for a Jeep with functional steering and suspension. So right now I'm retrofitting the 3D model of the Jeep to handle that. But yeah, I couldn't believe it, but I got it to work on my first try. And like I said, I need to go back and iterate it now, because now that I have it in my hand, I see that by rounding those corners, I will give this thing more articulation and it will be able to turn farther. Although I may yet print out today a set of wheels and tires and put on this to see exactly how far it's already going. I may not want it to go farther. Right now I'm modifying the two-door. But once I modify that piece of the frame, I can literally take that piece of the frame that I'm modifying and apply it to either one. So it'll require a different frame than what the current Jeep has. A different front bumper, because the front bumper will no longer be able to mount to the frame. The front bumper will have to I'll have to design the front bumper to mount to the fenders and grille. So, well, and same with the rear bumper when I do the rear suspension. The bumpers won't be able to attach to the frame anymore, because now the front piece of the frame has this connected to it instead. And the frame is shorter. But no, it's coming along. I'm really satisfied with it, and hopefully get more of that. Get some of the more, little bit of the support material. It's starting to work its way out now. There's still a little bit of support material in that, and it's working its way out as I turn this more. So yeah, it'll require some changes to the bumpers, because the bumpers won't be able to mount to the frame anymore. They'll have to mount to the body panel, one way or another. But I think that will be a worthwhile reprint the frame, reprint the bumpers, and then you can use all the existing pieces you already have printed. So new frame, new bumpers, and then replacing the axles front and back with which the back one will be easy. That's why I started with the front one, because the back one won't be articulated. It won't have to turn. Although I guess you could do four-wheel steering if you wanted to just reprint this one again and put it in the back turned around the other way. So those files will be available soon. I need to finish a couple things, because the frame isn't going to be ready yet. This piece is ready. I mean, I could go ahead and put the part I have in my hands Uh, this is just one of the axles. So you won't have to reprint the axles if you just reuse the axles you have printed for the wheels already on the original version. You'll just need 2 of them, one for each one of the new axle assemblies. Thanks for stopping by, Al. Appreciate it, man. So yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be functional, and you know that's why I said with each passing design, I try to tackle something new, so that I can take and use that on future designs, or go back and apply it to already existing designs. Right. So this is going back and applying the springs that I learned how to do to the Jeep to make functional suspension. But I thought, if I've got to tear apart the whole front end, I might as well make the steering functional while I'm at it. I've been thinking about what it would take to make it connect to the actual steering wheel as well, and I know I could do it. All I would have to do is put a little loop right here and run a shaft from the steering wheel all the way down to it with a little hook that interfaces with that loop that's offset from the shaft, so that when you turn the wheel, it pushes the loop that way and that way when you turn the wheel. So, I mean, I know I could do it. I just don't know if PLA would be strong enough to do it. I mean, that's why this steering linkage is as thick as it is. I mean, it's a little overkill, but I knew it was being printed out of PLA, and so I wanted to make sure it was, tough enough. And as thick as that steering linkage is, you're not going to break that steering linkage. Not without some extreme force. And even the pegs inside the axle are fairly thick. I mean, it's unlikely that you'll break them. Not without doing something silly. I mean, if you try and break it, if I sat here and I'd snap it. But just in general, overall, someone, once you get this thing glued together, let your kid play with it. Your kid's probably, unless he's like my grandson, not gonna break it. My grandson breaks everything. He is a master of destruction. That's why half his Skylanders have no heads or arms or legs. Like, which Skylander this used to be? So yeah, right now those flat spots are essentially functioning as bump stops. That's why I'm going to go ahead and put wheels and tires on it and see exactly, because it's hard to visualize how far that's really turning without wheels and tires on there. So I'm going to put some wheels and tires for it and see how far that's actually turning, because that may be far enough. Turning it farther may be overkill. But it's working as a natural bump stop. And the supports weren't too hard to break out of there. Right? Yeah. I kids. Grandson is 4 and 4.5. He destroys everything. So yeah, we'll have functional suspension, functional steering, and articulating axle. It's making these Jeeps, you know, more interesting for sure. And then as I get into cutting stuff apart for multi-material, I want to make um, many different multi-material design options for people. That's a good question, D. I would have to start off with the basics of RC because I've never been into RC. I haven't owned an RC vehicle since I was 12. That's been a long time ago. And so I've never tinkered with RC. I've never built an RC. I've never, any of that stuff. So I don't know. I might have to get myself an RC kit and sit down and learn the fundamentals of it. I know there's servos control the steering, motors control the locomotion. There has to be a transmitter and a receiver. Beyond that, I know nothing. Yeah, and that might be a good place to start because the open RC, the other thing about it is all I would have to do is attribute Daniel Noray, and I could develop a open RC kit that can be applied to the frames that I've designed. So I could reverse engineer his OpenRC kit to be applicable to any of my frames. And then if I could do that, then that would make all of my designs uh, upgradable to RC. Then we could have, big RC trucks and step vans and late hijacking Ed's live stream. What time did you stream last night, Ed? I didn't get a notification for it. But of course, I also could have been on stage. Or driving home. I didn't get home till about midnight. Cool, man. Well, I hope the stream went well for you. More of us out there making content and sharing information with people. It's just so satisfying playing with functional parts. So yeah, we're gonna have functional parts will be coming. Upgrades will be coming to my patrons probably by the end of the week. Because like I said, I've already got this part where it's ready to go. All I got to do is finish the frame, and the reason the frame's not ready is because I haven't cut apart the back end yet to do this to the back end, and I haven't figured out what I'm going to do with, because part of this process eliminated the inner fender wells, which would allow you to, between the wheel and the fender, you would be able to see all the way through the vehicle right now. So I gotta figure out what if anything I'm gonna do about that. Nice, dude. Ender 2 print farm in the house. Print farm McDonald. You can have one at work so you can print stuff and play with it in between design and stuff. And by the way, the S4 Robbie is printing beautiful. Look at that. My camera will focus. Come on. Focus. Anyway. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, it's like as soon as I went away from Capricorn Tube, it's printing beautiful. So I think Capricorn Tube was maybe the fitting has been slightly loose all along. And then it just finally got to a point where it was unusable. But yeah, as soon as I switched to the cheapo white Bowden tubing, that's all I did, and then re-leveled it after making, all that fuss with the extruder. I'm sure I was, I got it out of level. So I re-leveled everything, started printing, and just flawlessly beautiful prints. The best prints I've ever done on any printer, anyway, that I've held in my hands. I'm sure someone with a Prusa or Tom Jackson with any of his printers would go, "What? That print's terrible." But I don't have another printer that would dream of laying down layer lines that accurate. So yeah, I'm excited to get that frame done and print out a version of it myself and test it. Which I've got more filament coming. My Amazon Basics PLA that I ordered will be here tomorrow. It was $55.60 for 5 kilograms of Amazon Basics PLA. So I got, it's in the pack comes a 1 kilogram each of black, white, silver, blue, and red. Never printed with it. We'll see how it prints, but at that price I had to give it a whirl. That's, $11 a kilo. With relatively quick shipping. Because I don't have Amazon Prime. And even still, it'll be here tomorrow. So yeah, I'm going to print out some wheels and tires, excuse me, to put on this today. I'm half tempted to load up that gold silk and print the wheels in gold silk. Because I've been excited to use that for something too. And as good as the S4 is printing right now. Printing that gold silk on the S4, laying down layers as beautiful as it is. I don't know. Oh. Alright guys, well. Morning, Matt Johnson. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to fall over. It was a long, long, hard week on Broadway. Because what happens is you get smaller crowds and you know there's less money in it, and so you try harder to put on a show that they're willing to open up their wallets for, because you need them to really open them up to make up the fact that there's half as many people there than what was there 1 week before. We've entered the slump, the slow season. It'll pick up right around New Year's one more time, and then it'll fall off a cliff until March. So it'll be working just as many hours for half as much money. And once again, you just, when you have a smaller crowd like that, you try harder. You overdo it. You push harder than you've ever pushed, trying to put on the kind of show that they feel is deserving of tips. The Preds had a home game last night, which kept us from having a crowd until about 10 minutes before we were done. About 10 minutes before we were done, the place packed out. But prior to that rush at the very, very end, our peak, I think we had 5 or 6 people at our busiest. It was a rough night. But yeah, so we got functional steering, functional suspension. I'll work on finishing that up over the course of the next couple days, and have that up for patrons to start beta testing, early access, and whatnot. Like I said, I got to figure out what, if anything, I'm going to do about the inner fender wells being cut out to make room for the springs and the steering. Because I can't just put ones back in further set in, because it still needs to allow room for articulation. So I don't know. I may have to slice off and print just the front fender wells, the top part where the upper spring mount is, so that I can see how much travel I'm going to have there, so that I can design an inner fender well that allows some clearance for the axle articulation, but still blocks out most of the view of looking all the way through the Jeep from the side. I'll figure something out. If I was thinking maybe I need to put a shield that comes up in the center of the axle here, and then another shield on the outside that comes down that goes outside of it, so that they overlap each other. Right? I don't know. I'll figure it out. Always do. But I get the spring mounts welded to the frame, and then cut the back end of the frame apart and make a axle for back there. Excuse me. Tired. I got home about midnight, fell asleep about 2, got up at 6. But yeah, we'll keep adding to, upgrading existing models, and the 4-door Jeep hasn't gotten much in the way of downloads since I put it up, which, by the way, that's all live on Thingiverse. What was that? Whatever the first was. Was that Saturday morning? Saturday morning, I got up like 6 o'clock in the morning and started prepping the files to get them released to the public. So the 4-door Jeep is on Thingiverse, if you did not know, and the turret upgrade kit, so you can add turrets to your Jeeps. Those all went live on Thingiverse on December 1st. Yeah, like a slot on either side of the axle, and then cut it off like there, and that would still allow the axle to travel up into it, and the spring would probably bottom out before it would hit it, and then you wouldn't be able to see easily through the Jeep. Yeah, that might work. I'll figure it out, and then I'll put it up on Patreon, on the Discord for my Patreon patrons to be the first ones to take a crack at it. And I know Roy will be lined up to do it. You know, each step of functionality that I learn how to make will just make future projects more fun, and have more functionality and cool little stuff. Like this has given me an idea on another project, mounting the axle to or mounting this whole axle assembly to what I was previously using as axles, so that it articulates. This has given me some ideas. Me and having ideas might be a dangerous thing, but you know, we're gonna do it. Yeah, I probably will take a nap at some point today, because 4 hours of sleep is killing me. I don't want to spend my one day off sleeping, though. Well, that and my clothes dryer stopped heating, so I gotta work on that today at some point too. Weirdest place I ever fell asleep, I think, was at a club one time, waiting to go on while another band was playing. I sat down and I leaned my head back against the wall. Another band was playing and they were loud as could be, but I fell asleep anyway. And then probably second weirdest place I fell asleep was I've fallen asleep was getting a CAT scan. They put that cage around your head. Oh, thanks, Ed. Appreciate that, man. That was awesome, Ed. Thank you. That's always appreciated, man. But never, ever required. I do this stuff and I share it with you guys because I love doing it and I love sharing. You know, I want you all to be able to design the kind of stuff I'm designing. And so far, the things that I've shown you in the tutorials, you guys can design pretty much any of this stuff that I've designed. I didn't show you how to do springs because there's already a really easy tutorial out there on it. I may go back and revisit it for you guys, but the tutorial was literally a 1.5-minute long video. Maybe I will go back and do it. Oh man, you know, I appreciate every dollar. Thank you. That's awesome. That helps make a bad night last night a little less bad. So Fell asleep during a root canal. Okay, maybe. I think Roy wins. He fell asleep during a root canal. No, I didn't miss the gig. It actually woke me up when the other band stopped playing. It's like when it got quiet, I went, huh? What? Oh. So no, didn't miss the gig. It woke me up when it got quiet. I'm sure one of my other band members would have went, "Hey, dude, you need to get on stage. What are you doing?" So yeah, I'll finish up the modifications to the frame today, if not today, tomorrow, and I guess I could put them up, put those parts up before I finish modifying the bumpers, because with the amount of time the frame and these axles and springs and stuff will take to print, by the time you'd get those printed, I could have the not the axles, the bumpers done. This doesn't take much time at all. 2.5 hours to print this assembly here. I think the springs were 2 hours with an axle. So I printed these two springs and this axle here that the axle assembly mounts on the articulating point. It took about 2 hours on the Trunks EX1, and then the S4 took 2.5 hours to print the steering linkage and axle assembly. So it's not too bad. And then I'll have to do a second, axle design one that doesn't have any steering in it, which should be easier. I can just fuse those together, actually, probably, and cut that off right there. And then otherwise use the exact design I've already got. And then the fender wells, and then go ahead and release the frame and the files for this, and then sit down and revisit the bumpers and how to mount them. Longer springs for the lift kit. Well, the lift kit's also going to require a different articulation point. Because it hanging lower, you won't want the articulation point to be where the axle's at. You'll want the articulation point to be higher. So it'll require a different axle. It'll require moving this point up above it. Okay, well, that gives me something to think about down the line. Yeah, independent suspension would be fun. I may, yeah, we have to do A-arms. Which would be doable. Trickiest part there would be keeping it print in place, which is what I've done with this. I don't know. I might be able to do it. It might. It might. I guess we can test it. My dog's being a nut. What are you doing, Joe? Silly dog. So yeah, learning how to do wheels and tires today. Showed you where I'm at with the functional steering and suspension for the Jeep. And now I've got to think about lifting the suspension of the Jeep and keeping it functional. And if the pivot point would have to change. I'll have to sketch out some stuff and see. But I don't know if the pivot point would still want to be, if you'd still want the pivot point to be in the center of the axle. Or if you'd want it up here so that the axle moved more like this. I don't know. I'll figure it out. One way or another, I will figure it out. Oh gosh, I can't stop yawning. That's your job, man. It's your job. You're doing your job, that's all. You know me, I take it all in stride. I'll figure it out one way or another. Even if I got to re-engineer everything. Now, if I do A-arms to do independent front suspension, then I would have to convert the steering linkage. Would probably have to go to a ball joint, because it's going to have times where it's going to be torqued out and turning. Independent of each other. So far, you're the only one that's done the lift kit. Yeah, the a ball joint is the is what's in the center of the Scorpion, between the rear back wheel and the front wheels. The cab is a big ball joint, but I haven't tried a ball joint on a small scale. Which reminds me, Roy, have you had a chance to print the new version of the ball joint to go in the middle of the Scorpion yet? Of your Scorpion that you've already printed? Because it worked much better for me. See, you got some homework too. Reprinting the ball joint and adding the springs in the middle on your Scorpion. Of course, you probably have a hard time finding a color to choose to use with that color scheme. That thing's psychedelic, man. It's crazy. I love it. Okay, so you've got them printed, just haven't put them on yet. Which this is just the same springs, but smaller. Scaled down. So satisfying squishing those springs. Isn't it? It's just fun. And they're PLA, and they work just fine. This is something I wish I... This was what killed the first VSV design. Was I was trying to design it with functional leaf springs. And every leaf spring I printed broke. Wouldn't stand up to it. So now I'm like, man, I could go back and retrofit the first VSV design to this, and there are certain aspects, but the first VSV design is a mess. Let me go back to screen share here. Get the mesh is a mess, but you can see what I mean, where I had to cut out the inner fender wells to mount the springs. And so I'm thinking I can just bring this around so that it comes out the other side of the spring with a slot up here that would allow the axle to travel up into it. We will see. The original VSV, because the VSV that made it to the world was VSV version 2. This was the original VSV. Which never saw the light of day. It never got printed. Because it was designed to have functional leaf springs, which you can see up under there. But every leaf spring I printed broke. And I wonder now if I couldn't go back and take this body and put a new frame and new axles and stuff underneath of it, and this suspension system underneath of it, and breathe life back into it. But this was the original VSV design. And so then I took its general purpose, started over from scratch, and made this one. Which some aspects about the first one I like better. But that's when I was still learning how to do hinges, and its hinges are a mess. The mesh itself is a mess. There's a lot of stuff in it that didn't work right. It was manifold. I have to go back and redo. I don't know if it's worth putting the work into it. Because this was the very first thing when I installed Blender. The very first thing I designed. And it was ultimately was a failure. Like, I never finished articulating the turret on it. The door hinges were a mess because I did try to test print those and they didn't work. I did eventually steal the seats and the dash out of this and put in the current VSV. The axles were wrong, were a complete nightmare. Would never have worked. The attempt at functional suspension was a complete flop because I did not realize the limitations of the material at the time. I didn't realize that I would never be able to print a functional leaf spring in that design that wouldn't just snap after a few compressions. And now that I get coil springs, compression springs that seem to work as many times as I can squish them, they don't ever seem to break. If I'd have known how to do that back then, I could have designed it that way from the get-go. But like my original wheel design, the very first wheel design I did was this one, and it uses a hub that's a separate piece where the wheel slides over an axle shaft that has a hole in it, and then the hub plugs into there. The hub remains stationary while the wheel spins. Like I said, I don't think that was a sound design. It never would have worked. So I can show you my shortcomings when I first started trying to do this. So it was a mess. It never saw the light of day. It's unfortunate because it's a kind of cool looking little vehicle. It just, I was trying to do something similar to it when I started over, and it came up with something that turned out to be quite a bit different in the VSV2. But I simplified a lot of things and focused on function over form when I sat down to design this one. So now I have to redesign the bumpers to mount, to clip to the fenders somewhere. Fenders or clip straight to the grill, and then the grill clips to the fenders. And it'll have to be glued. I have made no further work on the trailer yet, and it's on the to-do list. I got sidetracked when I realized I could make functional suspension and steering. Yeah, twin I-beam like the old F-150s. That might be a good lift kit solution, really. And I don't think it would require any kind of ball joint either. And these aren't glued in yet, but they press fit in so snugly they held on through that. There's no glue in place yet. They just press fit in very nicely. I'm going to glue them, of course, because that'll be necessary when the suspension overextends a little bit at some point and pulls on the spring. Without glue, they would pop right out. John, good morning, sir. I was just showing everybody this. All the black plastic you see there is printed as one piece, printed in one print. And when you break the supports off, you have functional steering. So print in place, functional steering. On the screen share, there's the model in Blender. So you can see there's the axle, the steering control arm, and the spindles. Those just get printed as one piece. And then when you break the supports off, they squeak a little bit. Yeah, at some point I'll make a tutorial on all that. But essentially, it's the same design principles behind the hinge tutorial that I did a couple weeks ago. Because it's just a pin running through the surface, and you just add some clearance and punch it out. That's all it is. It's a hinge. And then print in place hinge, just like I showed everyone how to design a couple weeks ago. It's just doing multiples of them within one unit. So there's 4 within this one print. Which I've already updated the model, as you can see here. To round off the corner a little bit, because the corners of that were acting as a kind of natural bump stop. But I'm going to print some wheels and tires and put on this today and get a better look at it when the wheels and tires are turning, because I may want it to remain being a natural bump stop. I don't know, because rounding those off will allow it to turn a little bit farther, but maybe that's too far. So we'll see. But yeah, that's a print in place single piece steering unit. And I'm still toying with the idea of running a shaft from the steering wheel all the way out here and connecting it to a loop here on the control arm, the steering control arm, and being able to work it back and forth by turning the steering wheel. I might do that yet. I don't know. Yeah, I don't have time to sit and edit video. It's my problem. The time I give you guys now is pretty much most of the free time I have on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. But maybe I'll have some more time to put some of that stuff together here this winter, because things kind of slow down for me sometimes in the winter. my Sunday shows will go away in February for a month. So I'll have Sundays free for 1 month. So maybe I'll have a little time to do something like that. But it's just so satisfying when you make something that's functional, you know? When you sit and just kind of sit and play with it in your hands like that, you know? The springs, which, you know, again, those are PLA, functional compression springs, printed in PLA. And I've compressed them hundreds, maybe even thousands of times already. No breakage, no change in shape. Right? Yeah. And then, you know, you've got that point that you can spin. Where the axle will mount to the frame and be able to articulate the compression springs and the being able to turn the spindles and it's very satisfying. It really is. It's a very tactile, responsive kind of just thing to play with. Gives you lots of tactile satisfaction. So it's a lot of fun. It's been fun to design and figure out, you know, because I'm not an engineer. I don't even play one on TV. I'd like to. I'd like to play one on TV. But yeah, it's the same principle that I explained in the tutorial on hinges, where you just, you know, you have a cylindrical shape that you cut a hole that's a little bit bigger to make sure you give it enough clearance. And then when you print it in place, you just got the support material to carefully take needle nose pliers and pull out of there. And once you pull all the support material out, just lightly give it a little tug and until it breaks whatever else didn't come out, you know, support wise, out of there. And then it turns freely. Free and easy. Free and easy down the road I go. It would probably explode if you spun it with an air hose. Yes, it would probably fly to pieces. It is PLA. But this does give me an interesting thought when, you know, I believe it was Mr. Buttram was telling me the other day that I need to make a helicopter. Well, obviously, this same principle will work for spinning a helicopter blade that's working for spinning this axle right now. So yeah, look for a helicopter in the future. I could do something Airwolf-like, but Airwolf is somebody else's intellectual property. Intellectual property rights are important to me. I do not infringe upon others' intellectual property. I could do something inspired by, but no direct copies of anything from me. That's why I see those guys designing stuff that isn't just based off of somebody else's intellectual property. It is somebody else's intellectual property, and they're just fleshing it out into a 3D model, and then they're trying to sell it on these websites and stuff. And I'm like, at some point, the person who owns that intellectual property is gonna find you, and when they find out that you're profiting from their property, they're going to come after you. They're going to want their money because it's their property that you're selling. There's that whole gray area of, you're just selling your printing services versus selling the model, but people who are selling the model, yeah, it's never going to fly. It eventually someone's going to crack down on it, especially people that are copying properties that are owned by Disney. Disney is hardcore on that stuff, man. They don't play around. They find it, they will shut it down. And they have all the money and lawyers to do it. So yeah, I mean, it would be a very similar process making a rotor for a helicopter to what that's doing right there. It wouldn't really be any different at all. And again, I can't believe just press fit into place in that little lip that's there, how well those springs are holding on. Either way I spin it. And those are just press fit in. That means I got the tolerances on those just right. I mean, just right. It still will need to be glued, because when the suspension overextends, it will pull. And the pulling process will pull them out of the spring pocket. Yeah. Videos of stuff going boom. Yeah, seems to work for a lot of people. Anyhow, well, we've hit that 2-hour point, y'all. I appreciate you guys coming by today, hanging out. I hope y'all learned something in the tutorial. Thank you, Ed, for the tip. I appreciate that very much, man. And yeah, hope you guys learned something about making wheels and tires, and go back and watch the tutorial beforehand and cut some axles into it. So then you've got axles, wheels, tires, and hinges so you can make doors. You got everything you need. Go make a vehicle. Go make a vehicle. Show me what you got. Because I showed you hinges, I showed you axles, I showed you wheels and tires. That's all you need. That's all you need. Everything else is just spending the time and putting a little creativity into it. And I'll think of a good tutorial to come up with for next Tuesday. I'll see you guys Thursday morning. So thank you for stopping by. Appreciate you all hanging out. Anyone that's watching this, maybe that's not subscribed and watching me for the first time, if you like what you're seeing, if you like little tutorials like the one I did at the start of the video today, subscribe, ring the bell, get notified, follow me on Twitter. If you like my designs and you want early access, or you want access to some of the exclusive designs such as the lift kit for the VSV Jeeps, then consider throwing me a buck on Patreon. It's never required, but always, always appreciated. And we'll see you guys. We'll see you guys later. Thanks so much for hanging out, and hang out with Mike Whaley tomorrow on his channel. And we'll see you back here on Thursday. Thanks, Roy. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.